Claudia Cassatella, a professor of urban landscape planning at the Polytechnic University of Torino. I'm here with two colleagues from the University of Tokyo, Yokohari Makoto, full professor of landscape planning, and Murayama Akito, a professor of urban planning. Welcome to our Festival of Technology of Polytechnic University of Torino. I met both in Tokyo at a seminar on green infrastructures in 2016, the first of many occasions of scientific exchange. And the last was the keynote speech of Professor Yokohari at the National Conference of the Italian Society of Urban Planners in Torino, 2021. Both Professor Yokohari and Professor Murayama stayed at Polytechnic of Torino for research and teaching periods. The concept of the green infrastructure is a traveling concept in use worldwide. What's its meaning, and from your perspective, and how the green infrastructure can help in coping with climate change?
So when you say green infrastructure, I would say that there are two phases or two different meanings in green infrastructure. The first one is infrastructure with green things, and the second one is infrastructure with green thoughts. Now, when it comes to green things, well, if you go to downtown Tokyo, then even, as I said, Tokyo is a super crowded city, but still there are a lot of green things, which means that the green areas, open spaces, parks, or some ecosystems are still remaining in the center part of Tokyo. And then there are lots of examples. Well, maybe the largest one is an Imperial Palace, which is in the center of the city. And then even if you go to the CBD, the Central Business District, still you'll be finding a lot of green patches remaining. So on one hand, yes, when you talk about the green infrastructure, these green patches will be a part of the story. But at the same time, I would like to emphasize that it's not the only, but we have to consider about the infrastructure with green thoughts. Now, when I say green thoughts, this means that, when we compare green thoughts with the gray thoughts, the gray thoughts means that, mainly the buildings or any kind of infrastructure which are made out of concrete and steels and asphalts and so on. Well, these are made and also maintained. And if the quality goes down, then everything will be demolished and then built again, and then maintain it, and then build again. So it's a whole process of going up, and when it comes to peak, it goes gradually down. But then when it reaches to a certain point, once again, you rebuild it and goes down again. So that's a sort of great, the process based on great thoughts. And of course, and behind that, you have a certain plan. But when it comes to green thoughts, I would say that this is a sort of concurrent build and maintain processes, which means that you don't have any clear separation in between build and maintain. But these are kind of concurrent. And when you talk about, let's say, ecosystem or nature, well, I hope you can easily imagine that there's no certain plan in ecosystem, but you have a continuing process to flexibly adapt to a given condition to maintain well-balanced systems. But in the future, we have to think some mixture of these two, which means that on one hand, there should be green thoughts and gray things, or green things and gray thoughts. So green things and gray thoughts means that it's a sort of using conventional infrastructure with green things. And on the other hand, gray things and green thoughts mean that infrastructures made out of whatever it is, concrete or asphalt or whatever, but based on green thoughts. And I would say that all of these can be counted as green infrastructure. And I think that's a green infrastructure which we have to develop in the future.
When taking part at seminars on such issues at your institution, I was particularly impressed by the role assigned to the private sector in implementing green infrastructures and green solutions. Why and how the private sector is involved, which benefits do they expect?
Let me start with the city center story. Well, roughly speaking, I think there are two different ways that we are now trying to install in Japan. Well, the first one is which we call on-site green creation. And this is a sort of a story based on the regulation we have in Japan that if you create a new public use open space on the private owned land, then an extra volume will be given to the developer. Which means that if you go down to Tokyo city center, to the CBD, once again, you'll be finding a lot of those greens now created at the foot of the skyscrapers. And in many cases, these greens are on privately owned land, but the developer will be have been receiving extra volume by having these greens at the foot of those skyscrapers. And of course, and this is a sort of a story that has been pretty common in central part of Tokyo, especially by those places developed by major developers. So still today, we're finding a lot of those examples occurring, and I'm sure more and more are coming in the future as well. But on the other hand, when you go to suburbs, you still find some woods remaining in urban fabrics, tiny patches of woods still remaining. And once again, these woods are maintained by private sectors. So the question is, okay, how can we protect these woods still remaining in the suburbs? Well, unfortunately, you don't find those major developers in this area. So what we have been developing is that it's called the off-site protection. And this means that if a major developer in the city center will be protecting these woods remaining in the suburbs, then once again, these developers will be receiving extra volume for the development in the city center. So it's a sort of off-site story. So well, unfortunately, the second one is not that common yet because there are several technical problems or the difficulties that we have to overcome. But I'm quite confident that this will be another way that will be coming in the future.
Green infrastructures in the urban suburbs are owned not only by the public sector, but also by the private sector. For example, urban farmlands, small woods, small forests, temples and shrines, and green spaces within the private properties. Public sectors, but now losing budget in park and recreation and greenery, since more budget is needed for medical care and welfare in a super aging society of Japan. So I think the collaborative governance of various stakeholders, including public and private stakeholders, is extremely important. And a nonprofit sector, including universities, can play an important role in establishing and coordinating the collaborative governance structure.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Recently, some Italian cities too introduced innovations in their planning and management tools to involve citizens and the private sector in the direct provision and management of green areas and related services. In shrinking cities, as you said, less population also translates into higher costs per capita for maintaining public parks and greenery. At the same time, green-based solutions are more and more encouraged. As I mentioned before, the pandemic, the COVID pandemic period created the condition for a new appreciation or a deeper appreciation of open and green spaces. What was the effect of the COVID pandemic on Japanese cities?
Well, first of all, I have a very interesting survey which has been conducted by one of the real estate companies in Japan. And this company has been surveying the general public, the people, where they want to rent a house and move, or buy a house and move back in 2020 when Japan was in the first wave of the COVID-19. And here, this company has been surveying the Tokyo region, and they have been nominating the top 10 cities in Tokyo region where people are willing to rent a house and move, or buy a house and move. And the outcome was very interesting because there were so many cities in outer suburbs, some in the garden suburbs, which are more than 25 kilometers away from the city center, or even in resort areas or remote towns, something between 50 to 100 kilometers away from Tokyo, which we never had this kind of movement in before. When we think about the reason why this is happening, on one hand, if you try to live in the city center, there are so many risks emerging these days because, of course, we're talking about the climate change and natural disasters increasing in the city centers, and also infectious diseases, including COVID-19. And also, by having all of these new movements, we're now starting to find some conflicts and exclusions and that kind of social movements, even in Japan. But on the other hand, we're now starting to find many new technologies. Of course, ICT, the digital transformation, will be one of the bases. But at the same time, we're now starting to have smart personal mobilities, and also small-scale renewable energy grids as well. So by having, on one hand, the increasing risk of concentration to be in the city center, but at the same time, we have new technologies to realize dispersed living, which means that it's no longer necessary to live in a city center. So that consequently, what are happening in Japan now is that maybe concentration may not be better than disperse. We thought that concentration is better than disperse, and that's why we were talking about the compact cities. But maybe by having these risks and new technologies, maybe disperse is going to be better than concentration. And then on top of that, we're now starting to have new lifestyles and work styles. Japanese are no longer workaholics. So that, this might be pushing this new movement as well. So roughly speaking, I was saying that gray compact is no longer common or popular, but I think that in the future, gray disperse will become more and more common in Japan. In the past, people were talking about the parks, and they thought that the parks are the places where kids go to play and so on. But now, by having this new movement, yes, parks are important, but at the same time, those wide open greens, open spaces, like, as I said, the farmlands and woods and so on, are coming to be more and more popular. So I would say that is a major change that we have been observing within these 2.5 years.
Well, preserving farmland and in densely urbanized areas is a big concern for Italian planners as well. And the risk of losing fertile soil, of landscape degradation, moved the European Commission to establish the goal of having no net land take in 2050. Nevertheless, in Italy, urbanization processes and soil seeding are still growing, despite the severe demographic decline. New land use regulation and policies have been established. And moreover, I think that during the recent troubles at the global level, the public opinion perceived the importance of having green areas within the cities and having soil for food production. Professor Yokohari, you've been working on urban agriculture and on green infrastructure for a long time. What's their role and development in Japan?
Well, first of all, yes, I have been studying urban agriculture for over 30 years or so, and I've been studying many places in the world, including some cities in Asia, and also for other North American cities and European cities as well. but many of my study has been conducted in Tokyo. So that let me give you one example of what's happening in Tokyo now. Now, as you may know, Tokyo is one of the largest cities in the world, which accommodates more than 8 million people in the central core area, which we call 23 WARs. And then for whole Tokyo metropolitan area, we can count over 12 million people living. So it's a huge, huge city. But at the same time, we have been maintaining agriculture in the fringe of the city. And you might be surprised, but there are only 11 cities in the core area where you don't find any agricultural lands. Most of the agricultural lands are very small in size, and in total, we only have about 3% of the land area for agriculture. But still, agriculture is alive. And also, when I say farmland or agriculture, I mean that, of course, we do have some agriculture which are only for urban people and having recreational uses, but mainly agriculture and farmlands are owned by real farmers and they're maintained by farmers as well. So in that case, I would say that still real agriculture is remaining in Tokyo. Well, first of all, when you look back at the history of Japanese cities, urban-rural land use mixture has been part of the key character of many of Japanese cities in the history. So this mixture of urban and rural land use is not a modern invention, but it has been found in the history. There has been a lot of regulations to control or to give the right for farmers to protect their farmlands. Unfortunately, the urban land use control in Japan is pretty weak, so that we won't be having proper control so much, or so far we couldn't have so much proper control. So those are the reasons why that real agriculture has been remaining in urban fabrics in Japan. And then today, we are having kind of an increasing demand of having more agriculture in your neighborhood in cities. And this increase is because of the citizens' growing concern on fresh and safe food, for the first. And then they are really much concerned about the environment, including global warming. And then, of course, for these 2.5 years, the infectious diseases, including COVID-19, has been sort of a major concern of the general public. And of course, all of these concerns has been directly related to agriculture. So that, and also another major issue right now in Japan is a natural disaster, which is maybe common with Italy. So by having all of these reasons, that's why that agriculture or having farmland in your neighborhood is coming to be more and more demanded by the citizens. And also the other thing is that we are having super aging and also decreasing population. So that this means that we are now starting to have vacant lots, a lot of vacant lots emerging, even in downtown Tokyo. So the big question is, how can we utilize these places? And agriculture is one of the solutions.
Professor Murayama and I, we carried out a research, a joint project entitled Implementing the New Urban Agenda, Universities in Action. We studied how to deal with preserving open spaces in densely urbanized areas, involving our students too, and having the opportunity to apply our methodologies, to compare our methodologies on a real case study.
The title of our project was Planning for the Global Urban Agenda, Shaping Eco-Districts in Tokyo Suburbs. When Claudia and I were preparing for the project application, I was a new member of the City Planning Committee of the Suburban Municipality of Nishi Tokyo City. At that time, we were discussing about the importance of conserving urban farmlands in the city to maintain its residential environment. There are many urban farmlands owned and farmed by farmers dispersed through the city, and they were and still are under relatively high development pressure. It was important for the city to have a vision for a green residential area with urban farmlands and small forests. So we decided to choose Nishi Tokyo City as a field of our project. From autumn 2017 to 2018, with graduate students of Politecnico di Torino and the University of Tokyo, we conducted a series of online lectures and parallel studios on the same topic, shaping eco-districts in Tokyo suburbs. In March 2018, we held a joint on-site workshop for 5 days in Tokyo and presented the work to the city mayor and the city planning committee director.
Yeah, I remember that assembly with the Nishi Tokyo municipality and with the students of the University of Tokyo presenting their proposal. Any follow-up?
Yes, actually many activities developed after we held the joint workshop. On September 2018, a public exhibition and symposium on eco-planning and community development featuring green and water was held. There was a discussion between the city planning chief of Nishi Tokyo City and the professors from Polito and U Tokyo, emphasizing the importance of conserving urban farmlands. On July 2019, Nishi Tokyo City Planning Committee submitted a proposal for urban farmland conservation and value creation to the city mayor. And after that, Nishi Tokyo City prioritized urban farmland conservation in the city's agenda and formed an interdepartmental team to consider policies and measures. And from late 2021 to this year, a platform of various stakeholders related to urban farmland conservation was established through the workshops initiated by the city government. Currently, the Nishi Tokyo City Master Plan is being updated with the priority of urban farmland conservation and value creation. So I can say that collaboration of Polito and U Tokyo, especially the urban landscape design proposals from the students, initiated and accelerated the process of the city government to work on urban farmland conservation, and finally led to the formation of a multi-stakeholder platform.
Great, that's great, really. And the spatial planning system in Italy and Japan is very different. Nevertheless, don't you think that our two countries have something to share when looking at the societal and the environmental challenges of cities, territories, landscapes?
All the countries in the world are now sharing many challenges, which are climate change and natural disasters, and also infectious diseases and conflicts and exclusions, which I have been describing. And then on top of that, both Japan and Italy are sharing common local challenges, which are super aging and also shrinking society, and also a stagnated economy. And then we have changing work styles or lifestyles as well. Now, when it comes to this global challenges, the global common challenges, of course, as I said, I'm sure that we need more green open spaces, especially large green open spaces for human well-being. I'm sure that this is a sort of a global issue. But when it comes to our common local challenges, unfortunately, because of this super aging society and also stagnated economy, we don't have enough financial resources, especially in public sectors, to install more greens. So having said that, I would say that we have to encourage what you call public-private partnership, in short, which is called PPP. And but of course, this PPP is not not an easy question. I know that there has been many failures happening in Japan and maybe in Italy as well. So that I would say that when it comes to collaboration between Japan and Italy, we have to exchange good practices, but at the same time, the failures that we made as well, because in many cases, we can learn from failures.
Yes, I totally agree. Since we share many risks related to environment, society, and economy, I think we can work together. And these issues are connected globally. So it's good to have a global view toward how we can cope with these issues, also considering our local programs. So although the planning system is different, I think we can learn a lot from each other on planning and design methodology, both contents and processes, and also multi-stakeholder governance structure.
From my perspective, Italy and Japan have many similarities. We are among the most shrinking and aging societies in the world, territories of mountains and coasts, subject to natural risk, a rich historical layering, a rich landscape and cultural heritage, so many issues to nourish our dialogue on regional and planning, regional and urban policies and planning. So it was a privilege to discuss green innovation in shrinking cities together with you, to learn from your expertise and the research activities at the University of Tokyo. Thank you so much.